तथा पुरस्ताद्भविता प्रतीत औदालकीरारुणिर्मत्प्रसृष्टः सुखं रात्रिशयिता वीतमन्युः त्वां दृशिवान् मृत्युमुखात् प्रमुक्तम् स्वर्गे लोके न भयं किञ्चनास्ति न तत्र त्वं न जर्या बिभेति उभे तीर्त्वा अशनाया पिपासे शोकातिगो मोदते स्वर्गलोके सत्त्वमग्निं स्वर्ग्यमध्येषि मृत्यो प्रब्रोहितं श्रद्दधानाय मह्यम् स्वर्गलोका अमृतत्वं भजन्ते एतद्वितीयेन वृणे वरेण प्रते ब्रवीमि तदुमे निबोध स्वर्ग्यमग्निं नचिकेतः प्रजानन् अनन्तलोकाप्तिमथो प्रतिष्ठां विद्धि त्वमेतन्निहितं गुहायाम् लोकादिमग्निं तमुवाच तस्मै या इष्टकायावतीर्वा यथा वा स चापि तत्प्रत्यवदद्यथोक्तम् अथास्य मृत्युः पुनराहतुष्टः तमब्रवीत् प्रीयमाणो महात्मा वरं तवेहाद्य ददानि भूयः तवैव नाम्ना भवितायमग्निः शृङ्काञ्चे मामनेकरूपां गृहाण त्रिणाचिकेतस्त्रिभिरेत्यसन्धिं त्रिकर्मकृत्तरति जन्म मृत्यु ब्रह्मजज्ञं देवमीड्यं विदित्वा विचाये मां शान्तिमत्यन्तमेति त्रिणाचिकेतस्त्रयमेतद्विदित्वा य एवं विद्वांश्चिनुते नाचिकेतं स मृत्युपाशान् पुरतः प्रणोद्य शोकातिगो मोदते स्वर्गलोके एष तेऽग्निर्नचिकेतः स्वर्ग्यो यमवृणीथा द्वितीयेन वरेण एतमग्निं तवैव प्रवक्षन्ति जनासः तृतीयं वरं नचिकेतो वृणीष्व।
हरि ओम। नमस्कार। The 12th mantra that we last concluded, Nachiketa glorifies the Swarga as a preamble to his second boon, which is going to be asked in the 13th mantra. Tvam na tatra. You are not there. In heaven, there is no fear whatsoever. The 6 waves of sorrow that we spoke about. At the physical level, there is old age and death, the fear of death. At the mental level, there is sorrow and delusion. At the level of prana, there is ashana and pipasa, which is hunger and thirst. So at all these levels, there is pain, there is sorrow, there is suffering. Now, the pain, sorrow, or suffering, he says, all these are not there in heaven. Now, heaven is to be understood as a higher plane of consciousness. A plane of consciousness or an experience where there is no sorrow. Now, what we need to relate to is, to the extent one performs actions with a stigma of selfishness, with a stigma of egoistic notion, to that extent one would be subjected through pain, sorrow, or suffering. So the cause of sorrow or suffering is one's own actions arising out of ignorance. All of us are in fact, all of us have a certain amount of vidya, a certain amount of avidya. The avidya in the form, or the avidya or ignorance in the form of our own selfishness, vidya which combats that ignorance in the form of wisdom. To the extent there is that avidya, to the extent there is that ignorance in the form of your own selfishness, one will be compelled to act in a self-centered manner. To the extent you have committed such actions, one would be helplessly subjected through sorrow and suffering. So to the extent one is experiencing the sorrow and suffering, to that extent, remember, you have established a selfish, egoistic relationship with the world. Because the law would not go wrong. If I have sown a seed, there has to be the fruit thereof. So if I have sown the seed of selfishness, knowingly, unknowingly, one has to reap the fruits of such selfish actions. So one would be subjected through enormous pain or agony in any form. And if there is, when we are subjected through such phases, every one of us go through such phase of pain, whether be it at the physical level, he talks of old age or death, or fear of death, or the insecure feeling. So when one is subjected through that phase where you experience sorrow, what we are advised is to understand that I am being dished out my own karma phala. I am being subjected to experience my own fruits of my past actions. So I should not question it. I should not doubt the law of life. Rather, what should be the attitude? What should be the attitude when one is subjected through these moments? They are passing. They will pass because we have performed an admixture of selfish and unselfish, and perhaps to a certain extent selfless actions. To the extent there is that selfishness, you will be dished out of papa. To the extent there is unselfish, you will be transported through heaven, which is what the mantra is glorifying. But when you are subjected through pain, what should be the attitude? All of us are subjected through it, because we all have performed actions arising out of avidya. Avidya is ignorance, and ignorance expresses in the form of selfishness and attachment. So when we are subjected through that, when we go through that, what should be the attitude is the question. Because you have no choice but to go through it. But when you go through it, how should you approach it? If you don't understand, if you are not able to approach it rightly, that hell becomes veritable hell. The agitation becomes far more pronounced. Not only you're suffering, you will be cursing yourself. Why are you going through that? That is inflicting further pain, causing further agony to yourself. So, what should be the attitude? We must understand it's relative. We must understand it's temporary. But when you're going through that, what should be the attitude? Yes, SR, you have something to say, please?
Pranam Guruji. Yeah, the attitude at that point of a moment is, I think, one way connotation can be is a passing clouds. Let it. So not to take it and take it because you are the. It's all because of your own karma, your own actions, which are thing. So be aware of that, and it's all momentary. It's like in a passing clouds, and you being responsible, you own the actions of it. I think that's where we need to realize at that moment so that we don't blame anybody in the world. So the moment you take the actions, I mean to say you take the responsibilities, the buck stops there.
Absolutely. When you understand it is passing, what would be your attitude? When you say passing clouds, what would be your attitude to it? You said it, but you haven't. I'm looking at what should be the attitude to it. When you say it is passing, how would you relate to it?
No, that word, specific word I could not.
No, I'm not looking at a specific word, but I'm looking at the attitude that one would cultivate to something we know it is temporal, something we know it's going to pass, which in itself is very difficult. See, when one is going through pain, one is being subjected through sorrow, to understand that it is temporal requires a lot of wisdom. Because many of us become victims of that sorrow or suffering. We become, it's like we are crushed in that moment. We are not able to ride through that phase. We becomes victims of that phase. So it's very difficult. So even to understand it is passing and fleeting, you require a lot of wisdom. You get it? Now, further to that, once you understand it is passing, how would you deal with it? What would be the attitude that surfaces is the question.
It's something like the word of patience doesn't exist there.
All right. Not wrong, Reddy Garu. You are absolutely spot on. Ashrama sent me a direct message. She said, go out and do seva, by which you will forget the pain. Yeah, why not? What should be the attitude? It's very easy to say, stay unaffected. See, the quality that we have to practice. Okay. Yes, Setuji.
Guruji, this we have to accept, since we are the culprit. Acceptance is through, see, whoever is giving us the suffering, he is only a tool. we should not fight with him, because this suffering will come from X or Y or in some manner. Generally, the tendency is to resist that person and thinking we have done so much to him and he is not grateful and he is cheating us. But something else in the past we have done is rooted through him.
So you rightly said acceptance. Not to
Consciously accepting that it is for a reason and it is not the person who is giving us suffering is only an instrument or tool.
Absolutely. In fact, you uttered a word which was a line of thought I was thinking at. You said, "Don't resist it," which were one of the words of Jesus Christ. He said, in the complete quote, he said, "Judge not others and resist not evil." So the second half of that quote where he says, "Resist not evil," evil refers to the punishment or the pain or the suffering you're being subjected through as a consequence of your own past actions. So you don't resist it. You gracefully accept it and let it pass. So what you need to act, what we generally do is we resist it. So we should not resist that experience of pain or sorrow or suffering. So accept it as a karma phala and let it pass without developing any attachment to it. So what's required is you must remain extremely objective, as if we had to say, "I have got nothing to do with it." That kind of an attitude. So we tend to resist that pain. So that advice is, don't resist it. Let it come. It's coming for a reason. Let it happen. That kind of an attitude. Yes, Seduji?
Guruji, I wanted to share incidents which I heard, true incident. One gentleman took a loan from his own grandfather and he didn't return it, and he is in a better position to give, and that man needs it. But that man made a big fuss of it and he started troubling him. And then when he accepted and when he at a later date, this grandson went and told apologized to grandfather and all that. Grandfather was nice enough to waive it and he said, I don't want it back. So many situations when we face and accept and fully, the same person again reciprocates. This I have also personally experienced on occasions. So surprisingly, the intensity gets lowered and ultimately over a period it gets solved.
Very true. Very true, sir. You know, when we understand the law of karma or the law of action, how it functions, one emotion that should be with you is the emotion of profound bhaya. Bhaya in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. Bhaya is a sense, is like while you're driving, you understand that if I am reckless I may become victim of my own reckless actions. So I need to drive safe for my own safety, forget others' well-being. So when you function, that when you understand that the law of karma functions so meticulously, the ultimate witness to that is my own conscience, and I can't escape that. And if I am aware of that law that governs my actions, I tell you, there's such an amount of fear even to think selfishly, forget to act selfishly. You wouldn't want to even entertain a thought of your own selfishness. Means, how can I use or abuse a particular situation or a person or relationship? That thought itself, there'll be bhaya. Forget acting on it. You may say, I'm doing it in anonymity. No, there's nothing happens in anonymity. There is that conscience that constantly observes and witnesses every action that you perform, and such deeds, every deed, every action will dish out equal consequence to you. You have to face it. When that awareness comes in, I tell you, you will be watchful of every action. You'll be mindful of every step you take. That awareness is wisdom. If you ask me what is wisdom, that awareness where you become conscious of your actions, that is wisdom. And that must come from within. And no amount of external advice can help you unless until you come to a realization. So the 12th mantra only mentions as a matter of fact that in heaven there is none of this. As we described happiness as cessation of agitations or cessations of any negative emotion of sorrow arising from delusion. All right, so let's move on and take the 13th mantra, please.
सत्त्वमग्निं स्वर्ग्यमध्येषि मृत्यो प्रब्रोहितं श्रद्दधानाय मह्यं स्वर्गलोका अमृतत्वं भजन्ते एतद्वितीयेन वृणे वरेण.
O death, thou knowest the fire ritual which leads one to heaven. Reveal that to me, for I am full of faith. Shraddhanaya, I have that Shraddha. I am one full of that Shraddha of faith. That fire by which those aim to the attainment of Svargalokaha, attainment of heaven, attain Amrutatvam, immortality. I seek this as Dvitiyena Vrane. I seek this as my second boon. So Nachiketa is cashing in on the second boon. Now here you see the words that by fire those attain heaven. He also qualifies the other word here. He uses Amrutatvam, attain immortality. Now, immortality here should be taken at a relative sense, not absolutely, please, because you don't gain immortality through RPG. The immortality here is relative. And how do we interpret that? You don't attain immortality through dash.
You don't or you do?
Yes, you don't attain, because in the mantra he says through that yajna or fire ritual, he says by which those attain heaven and attain immortality. So the word immortality is being interpreted from a relative sense. And the question is, you don't attain immortality through, in the context of the mantra.
Through action? I'm not sure, Guruji, what the...
So, okay, now, what is the mantra talking about? The mantra, isn't the mantra talking about the fire ritual?
The yajna, you're right.
Yajna. And what does yajna symbolize?
Sacrifice, the ritual of...
It symbolizes, I'm saying. Though yajna is a fire ritual, but what does the yajna symbolize? Yajna, does it not symbolize an act of service and sacrifice? So when one performs unselfish or sacrificial actions, what does one get?
Well, one gets, I think, at a sort of base level of the satisfaction from that, but also gains a step towards a higher level or step. Guruji, I'm not sure where you're trying to...
No, I'm just trying to go with the flow from the previous mantra, where he said, in heaven there is no sorrow, right? We spoke about it. He is asking his second boon, where he is asking for the capacity to perform yajna, which is service and sacrifice, which is to do unselfish work. Now, my point I'm clarifying here is, when he says immortality, one does not attain immortality through performing unselfish work. That's what we're trying to say. When you perform unselfish work, you only get what is attainment of heaven, but you don't get attainment of immortality. That's the point I was trying to get it out. So you don't attain immortality through unselfish work. When does one attain immortality? Now, this is a direct question.
I think immortality comes from that ultimate meditation and selfless actions.
Perfect. So one attains immortality through performance of desireless or selfless actions. So we must classify actions into three types: selfish, unselfish, and selfless. Selfish gives you sin. Unselfish gives you merit, punya. Selflessness gives you immortality. Isn't it? So when he says the word immortality here it is meant in a relative sense. Now, who is it that is remembered much after they have gone? Who is it who doesn't die in the memory of people? Who is it who is remembered relatively? Whom would you recount? Whom would you recall?
Those that have done their work selflessly, given their all towards the common good.
Those people who have, I would qualify here, those who have done unselfishly. Means those who have lived the life, who have been a giver, they would be remembered for long after they have gone. In that sense, you and I become immortal if we have lived a life of sacrifice. If I live for my own well-being, even after I'm gone, maybe they'll remember me in a wrong sense. Sorry to quote a context. There was a a political figure who passed away recently, yesterday, I think yesterday, day before, in an accident, a local leader. And the talk is, oh, I come to know she has amassed enough wealth for herself. Her funeral also has not happened, and people are criticizing that person. So what would be the karma that even after your death, people are cursing you? Imagine. So attain immortality here in the sense that they're not forgotten because they have lived a life of service and sacrifice. That's the point I wanted to clarify first. Now, in the mantra, he says, O death, thou knowest the fire which leads one to heaven. Reveal that to me because I am full of faith. So the word Agnim, fire, even though it's translated as the Vedic ritual, that word has a far deeper meaning. The word fire or Agni has to be interpreted as the capacity to conceive a higher goal and serve that ideal. I repeat, fire is implied not as the mere ritual, but the capacity to conceive a higher ideal and serve that ideal. Now you got to ask yourself, what is that ideal that you are able to conceive? And the definition of an ideal is, the definition of a goal is, it speaks out in this context. It is obvious, but we need to justify it again. Arunama, what is the definition of a goal or an ideal in the context? In fact, we maintain that throughout, but it is more apt here.
Hari Om Guruji.
Yes, ma'am. Hari Om.
A higher ideal would be when you're serving a higher cause, that is a life of service and sacrifice.
But what is higher cause? What is a higher goal? How
Something
would you
that
define a goal?
something where you go beyond your interest for the common good of society.
So the definition is, it must be beyond yourself. A goal must be beyond yourself. And it encompasses a common cause, a common good. Now the question is, how lofty can you conceive a goal? Yeah, it has to be, your family also is beyond yourself. But is that all that one can conceive?
No.
If one only thinks of the family, his goal is very small, isn't it?
Yes.
Now let's be realistic. What is that goal that you can conceive? The highest goal that you can conceive?
Highest goal is our purpose in life to be achieved immortality.
But can you conceive that?
No.
That's why I qualified it. The highest goal that you can conceive, and then you're working towards. It's not just conceiving. You conceive it, and yet you also serve that ideal. Day in and day out, you're serving that ideal.
The highest goal, I don't know, I'm trying to interpret it with regard to my own life. I mean, something where our personal desires keep decreasing. So, when we decrease our own personal desires, the selfishness in us decrease. So we are able to think more about others. Then our ideal is increasing. So we are going from the family to the, the society, to the country, to the world at large. So that they slowly, step by step, you build realistic goals and you keep on increasing it. Put in more effort.
Yeah, but well said. But I'm looking at one specific thing that you say, this is my goal. It's like when a sportsman is playing his sport, he can play that sport for his own name or recognition. He can play the sport for the perks and the rewards that he gets out of his performance, or he say, I want to bring pride to my nation. So he is not thinking of all the rewards and the perks and the applause that he gets, but he's thinking of the nation. So he replaces his personal agenda with the joy of seeing his nation's name flying high. So there is that paradigm shift he brings from himself to the nation.
Yeah.
In that sense, what is that goal? And thereafter, he constantly strives to bring repute to the nation. He wouldn't do anything. It's like, imagine a sportsman, a celebrity. He gets himself, he goes to a pub, gets drunk and has a fight and gets into a brawl, and he's in the media. What would it do? Obviously, it would bring disrepute to himself, but it also brings disrepute to the team he's representing and the nation he's representing. He wouldn't do anything that would bring disrepute to his country. So he not only thinks of himself, he thinks of the nation, every action he does. So not only conceiving the ideal, but acting in the interest of the ideal at all times. So the reason I'm mentioning is you all subjectively must have a clarity as to what is that ideal that you are able to conceive and you're able to serve that ideal. No point conceiving if you can't serve that ideal. Many of us talk of self-realization. We can't conceive self-realization. Tell me genuinely, how many of you in this classroom can actually conceive moksha or immortality or self-realization as your ideal? I'm not challenging you all, but I'm genuinely saying, would you be able to, if you can't serve that ideal, there's no point saying it's my ideal. So the fire means to conceive it and to serve it. So what conceives the ideal? Thanks, Arunama. Amitama, what is it that conceives the ideal?
Hari Om, Guruji.
Ma, I've already greeted you all in the very beginning.
Okay.
Folded palms.
Yeah. So what conceives the ideal? Is that your question, sir?
Did I confuse you? Did I distract you?
No, I think I was going back to the earlier question. What is it that you can conceive that we can, for us, what is it that we can conceive? For me,
not for us, for yourself.
For myself.
Don't include us in it.
Okay. So what that would be for me is to become the like a role model. That is something that is conceivable. So my actions and my interpretation of this knowledge, of this wisdom, so that I can become like a I don't know, like a model for others within my community, within my circles.
That is the effect. I'm asking the cause.
Sorry,
you would become a role model because of certain things, right?
Yeah.
But my question is, what makes you become what you become? What is the cause of it? What is it that you're able to conceive?
Yeah, it would be a reflection of seeing how my actions can become more and more refined based on this knowledge. Would that be the cause? learning the reflection.
You are telling me the process.
Okay.
I'm asking, what is the goal that you are identifying with? Many people don't have a clear goal. I'm not trying to be personal here to anybody, but when you analyze it, many people don't have a clarity as to what the goal is. It's like saying, I don't keen a destination where I'm traveling. And if you don't keen a destination, where will the GPS? The GPS doesn't even guide you. And what conceives an ideal?
The intellect, sir.
It is indeed your intellect. So the question is, how wise is your intellect? How mature is your intellect? If your intellect is shallow, your goal also is very shallow. If your intellect is fired with that ideal, you'll be able to conceive a higher ideal. So it is directly proportionate to your intellect. Opposite of intellect is, Srinaji, what is opposite of intellect? I'm trying to spell it out. We understand how do we differentiate it.
Indolent.
What is the opposite of intellect, sir?
Opposite.
Hmm.
The absence of it.
Yeah, when you have no intellect, what will happen? What is the opposite of the intellect? Philosophically, don't look at the dictionary, please.
I'm trying to think of the consequence. Would it be an uncontrollable flow of desire?
Indeed. So when it is lack of intellect, it is the mind and it is insatiable desires that you're running behind. So if you have no ideal, you would run behind the mind and its constant desires. So how do you checkmate the mind is by conceiving a goal. Something to say, Sinaji? Sorry, can't hear you.
Is this another way of saying adopting the higher to drop the lower?
Yeah. When you embrace the higher, indeed the lower drops. Yes. So you need to introspect and ask yourself, what is it that I am working for? Every action that you perform must have a clear direction. For what am I doing? Again, when you say introvert is a very vague. I want to go to Hyderabad. The GPS will ask you where you want to go in Hyderabad. Huh? Where in Hyderabad? There can be 100 places you want to visit in the Hyderabad. You've got to be specific. I hope not. He's saying Charminar Gayatri Ma. So the capacity to conceive and serve a higher cause, a very clear ideal. Your next destination, huh? So, a factor, a common factor which involves everybody, a common factor which you can work towards. Now, look at the smartness of Nachiketa. He says, further to it, he says, I am Shraddha. I have that Shraddha, Shraddhanaya. I am full of faith, he says. Now, as I said, one is to have the ideal. It's yet another thing is to serve the ideal. The third qualification is to have the Shraddha in it. So Shraddha, as we interpret, is the capacity to continue to serve the ideal until you reach the goal. So one is to conceive the ideal. Second is to be able to serve the ideal. The third is the capacity to serve it until you reach the goal, which is Shraddha. Now, these three are very, very important, and all these three together imply the word yajna or the word fire. See, a relative ideal that I can throw to you all, a common ideal that I can talk about is the very knowledge that we are learning. Now, if you consider this knowledge itself as an ideal, you would say, I would want to imbibe this knowledge. I would want to serve this knowledge, and I must have the Shraddha that I must convert this knowledge into wisdom. So the relative ideal all of us can have automatically, the fact that we are students of this knowledge, the relative ideal we all can have is for my own self-development, my own self-transformation. So I would have to serve this knowledge. I have to serve this wisdom. I must have Shraddha to convert this knowledge into wisdom. That can be the least ideal we all can think of with reference to this knowledge. Or you may say, I just received this knowledge. I get benefited by this knowledge. I'm ungrateful to this knowledge. I don't do anything to serve this knowledge. I don't know where it is coming from, how it is coming. I don't need to do anything to sustain it. I will take it as long as it comes. That attitude of carelessness, just because it is coming, I take it, that attitude is not accepted. That is lack of an ideal. So the effort you put in to ensure that the ideal is served in the process you develop yourself. So that fire, Nachiketa is asking, that fire by which those attain heaven, those attain immortality, I seek this as my second boon. Even though the mantra is, the word fire is translated as ritual, because in the next mantra, in fact, in the 15th mantra, the Lord gives out the actual elaboration of the ritual, but Nachiketa is blessed with the second boon in the 14th mantra. Yes, please.
प्रते ब्रवीमि तदु मे निबोध स्वर्ग्यमग्निं नचिकेतः प्रजानन् अनन्तलोकाप्तिमथो प्रतिष्ठां विद्धि त्वमेतन्निहितं गुहायाम्.
So the Lord is obliging the Brahmin boy with blessing the second boon. So he says, I know well the fire ritual on Nachiketa, which leads to heaven. I will tell it to thee. Learn it from me. So he's actually alerting the boy and saying, I am going to tell you, you better learn it from me. Know that it is the means of attainment of eternal heaven. And Pratistham. Pratistham means the support of the universe, seated Nihitam Guhayam, the famous words of the Shastras, where he says Nihitam Guhayam means seated in the cavity of your heart. See, in the Vedic period, you must understand, the Vedic period, the knowledge was given directly by the Guru to the Shishya. There were no scriptural texts, there were no notebooks, there was no written scriptures. So the only means of communication was what the master told, was heard by the student. Now, what is required in such a transaction is an acute intelligence and a sharp level of receptivity that you are able to receive whatever is said by the Guru. So just to ensure that Nachiketa does not miss what was being taught, Nachiketa is told, be alert. And he says, learn it from me, he says. So there are a couple of epithets that are used to praise Agni, or the fire ritual. He says, first he says, Agni is the attainment of heaven. The fire ritual is the means of attainment of heaven. Now, I am sure you understand what heaven is, but I also plead you all not to be enamored by heaven. Don't be enamored by heaven. What should you be enamored by, Vasantama?
We should be more enamored by doing good deeds.
Appa, if you do good deeds, what would you get?
I mean,
Answer the question. Huh? If you do good deeds, what do you get?
get heaven.
Therefore, what are you saying? You are giving me in a different form. Question is, you should not be enamored by heaven.
You should be more focused on
Lost for words, Vasantama. What should you not be enamored by? In fact, in the next mantra,
enamored by all the happiness that you're going to achieve by.
sorry, can you come again?
Desireless, so that
No, can you come again, please? I lost that.
we desire for heaven for all the happiness and this
Ah,
that is.
ah.
Our aim only should be towards the goal, not the phala.
What is the goal here?
Goal, relative goals each time you are trying to, whatever you are going to have.
See, I am teaching an Upanishad and I must be true to the Upanishad. So if you are attuned to the Upanishad, you will understand what is to come. See, the context is Nachiketa actually, in fact, in the next mantra, can we just share the translation, please? Okay, now if you read the 15th mantra, I'm not explaining it, but the translation reads, Lord Yama explained to him that fire ritual the source of the worlds, what type of bricks and how many and how to be placed. And he, Nachiketa, repeated. There's some grammatical errors, please double check all the spelling errors, please. Nachiketa repeated back as explained. Then Yama, pleased at this, said again, next mantra. Being delighted, the magnanimous Lord spoke to him, I grant now this additional boon. This fire ritual, which shall be named after thee. So he is giving extra 2 boons is giving. He says, which shall be named after thee. And then this multifarious necklace. Now, when we come to the 16th mantra, this second additional boon that he gives, this interpretation of multifarious necklace refers to the additional ritual where you perform to gain punya, to get all your desires fulfilled. Which interestingly, in the second chapter of the very Upanishad, Nachiketa rejects it. Yama is saying, oh, you did not, I gave you additional boon, you didn't take it. So what, I don't know whether you're following the line of thought. Nachiketa rejects the second additional boon, whereby you can get all worldly pleasures or worldly happiness. He rejects it. He doesn't take it. So you and I should not be enamored by
all the
what?
worldly, outward worldly pleasures, outward.
We should not be enamored by worldly pleasures, or we should not be enamored by punya. What should we be enamored by? We should be enamored by the immortality in the absolute sense. We must be interested in moksha. You must be interested in moksha. You must try to gain an affinity to that, not just some worldly pleasures, not some worldly satisfaction, not to gain mere punya. So through Agni, you gain the attainment of heaven. Know that it is the means of attainment of eternal heaven. He qualifies the word eternal, heaven, by saying eternal, but again relative, don't take it absolutely. And then he says the word support of the universe. The Sanskrit word for support of the universe is known as Virat. Now, something which you need to know technically, I'm just trying to clarify that here. I'm trying to use the whiteboard. Right. So when the consciousness expresses through the microcosm is the individual waker. It is known as Vishwa. Through the microcosmic dreamer, it is known as Taijasa. Through the microcosmic deep sleeper is known as Prajna. Now, the same consciousness, when it operates through the macrocosmic waker, is known as Virat. And this is what, in the context of the verse, dreamer is known as Hiranyagarbha. So these are the technical terms that are used to explain how the consciousness is nothing but Brahman. In layman's term, you can call it as God. Now, the same Brahman which is expressing through the individual is the same God that's expressing through the totality. So when the consciousness functions through the individual goes through the waking, dream, and deep sleep, the three states. So when the individual expresses, so when the consciousness expresses through the individual waker, it is known as Vishwa. To the dreamer, Taijasa. Through the individual deep sleep, known as Prajna. And the consciousness, when it functions to the macrocosm waker, it's known as the Virat. When he says in the mantra, he says it is support of the universe, refers to the Virat. The macrocosmic dreamer is known as Hiranyagarbha, and the deep sleeper is known as Ishvara. Now, don't worry if you can't relate to it. These are technical terms given. What it means is the Brahman in me is the same Brahman which is expressing through all living beings. The God in me is the same God in all living beings. So what is he saying? I hope all of you have captured it. So he's saying, as I said, the epithets that are used to praise Agni. So the fire ritual or the yajna, the spirit of yajna, is the support of the universe. Means that which supports the entire world is yajna. Imagine a world without the spirit of yajna. The world without that spirit of yajna would perish. Now I would draw your attention to in the third chapter, the 14th and 15th verses. I would want you to refer to the third chapter, 14th and 15th verse, where he talks about the famous agricultural metaphor. When we come back the next class, I will perhaps draw your attention to it, but take a reference to it. where he talks of the entire, where he says the pivot, the entire world revolves around this yajna. Imagine everybody in this world are selfish. Just imagine, everybody are grabbing, everybody are taking, everybody is destroying other for their own well-being. What would happen to that world? Okay, if we can't conceive at the macro level, let's think in terms of an organization. Raghu, if everybody in the organization is only trying to grab or take something from the organization, what would happen to that organization, sir?
Yeah, probably may not prosper. Hari Om Guruji. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It may not prosper. A little further, can you go? How further? What will happen if it continues? There is no
Yeah,
question of prosperity. There is no profit, right? What would
Yeah.
happen if they continue?
They continue probably, but as per my understanding, they are paying salaries, all the organizations. So, including myself, I'm working for a company. They are paying my salary. I'm taking the money and giving them my time and coming back. I'm also a little bit selfish what I'm doing, but still, company is doing very well.
You're selfish, huh?
Means I'm taking the salary and selling my time.
Can you please give your credentials? I need to report to the company.
That company is making billions of dollars and prospering with my selfish attitude or probably, but
Yeah, Raghuveru. No, I'm just trying to create an idea of what happens if everybody in the organization are trying to abuse their position. So you have a position, you have a certain liberty, you have certain roles, which is to act. Your company has given a job, a portfolio that you can serve the organization, right? So you are working to enhance the good of the organization. Imagine everybody is trying to find ways and means and find loopholes how they can benefit from the organization.
yeah, that productivity will be very less. That would I can.
First point you said is productivity. Now, what would further happen if everybody, let's say, there are 1,000 employees, and each one, right from the chairman to the clerk, everybody is trying to see how I can make use of the organization for themselves. What would happen to the organization?
Yeah,
First
definitely.
step, you said not productive, right, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah? Now, please send the credentials privately.
Yeah, sure.
SR, what would happen to the organization if everybody is trying to abuse, sir?
It won't sustain, Guruji. It slowly deteriorates and collapses.
It would come to a point where it would die.
Yes.
It collapses, it perishes. It comes to a dead end, isn't it?
Yes.
Imagine the whole world is operating in the spirit of non-yajna. What would happen?
Doesn't exist. And a day comes where the world doesn't exist.
The world doesn't exist. Sir, if you look around us, is it not true that everything around us is functioning in the spirit of yajna?
Yes.
The tree yields fruits. Is it not operating in the spirit of yajna? The earth yields vegetation. Is it not in the spirit of yajna? The cow gives milk. If the milk doesn't come at the door, you go and ask the milkman, why did the milk not come? He says the cows have stopped giving milk. What would happen?
Yes.
The plants have stopped giving oxygen. What would happen? The clouds have stopped giving rain. What would happen?
Why
The
do
sun
they-
decides not to shine. What would happen?
Then the wind doesn't come. What will happen?
The wind doesn't blow. What would happen? So everything around us is operating with the spirit of yajna. And the only creature that operates, chooses not to operate in the spirit of yajna is subjected through. Who is that, sir? The only creature doesn't operate in the spirit of yajna is
Human being.
human beings. And we who don't act on the spirit of yajna are subjected through sorrow, the 6 waves of sorrow. Now, can you imagine the entire world is supported by yajna?
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Except
so.
we.
Sorry, sir. Go ahead. Yeah.
Except we, Guruji. In fact, recent statement that the minerals which are available on Earth is not sufficient for humankind. They are planning to go for a deep ocean mining. You can imagine what will happen to the ecological system of deep ocean mining they want. And they build the big ships which can extract the minerals from the deep in the ocean. The greed is never ending.
Sir, the need and the greed, you can never satisfy. So only when you think in the lines that we have analyzed, you'll understand how yajna is the pivot that sustains everything. Therefore, he says yajna is the support of the universe. Then, so anything that you do, and I remember the attitude or the immediate comment. I don't know, those of us who went for the trip and we stopped at the souvenir store, and I could see that spirit of yajna with which Reddy Garu said. There were, some small souvenirs, whether it could be T-shirts or it could be mugs or it could be caps. And our initial thought is to bargain. What did you say, sir?
Yes, Guruji. It's a momentary thing that let's not bargain. So,
he said, we will not bargain. Whatever that fellow asks, we'll give it. Why? If that man can make 50 rupees more in a T-shirt or 100 rupees more in a T-shirt, I would not become a pauper. Let him survive. Let him make that extra money. The thought of yajna spirit I could see in that. I don't think he thought when he said, but he spoke in his pure spirit of yajna. Let us, rather than squeeze that man for something for ourselves, let me give a little bit more and make him survive. And if we all do that act of giving a little more wherever we go, I tell you, so much of joy, so much of happiness. Not only we create in others, but it results in, you don't have to do extraordinary things in simple acts. And if you all can spread that wave of yajna, a long, long way we go. So, though the yajna is a fire ritual, it has a far deeper implication, far deeper meaning. So one is the 3rd chapter, verses 14 and 15 that I have referred to, which I'll come back. And in the 4th chapter of the Gita, verses 25 to 30, he dissects action into 12 facets and he gives out 12 yajnas. So I want you to refer to that. Some time ago, we have done that 4th chapter, verses 25 to 30. So I will come back to these 2 sections the next class and explain the relevance of yajna or the deeper implication of the word yajna of fire. We'll continue. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.